Do you love badass women of history? Then you need to meet Klondike Kate, the queen of the Yukon, and her unexpected connection to Tacoma's Pantages Theater. Join Shea and Jody of Rainy Day Rabbit Holes for a special live podcast event, Wednesday, September 16th at 7 p.m. at the beautiful McMenamins Elks Temple in Tacoma, Washington. It's a night of storytelling, local history, and a few truly questionable life choices that somehow all lead right back to Tacoma. We'll also be doing a meet and greet from 6 to 6:30 p.m., so come say hi before the show. Get your tickets at rainydayrabbitholes.com and come find out why all roads lead to Tacoma. It was a cure-all, a clear, sparkling liquid, promising energy, vitality, and relief from pain. It was modern, scientific, cutting edge. And for a little while, it seemed to work. Old injuries felt better. Nagging aches faded. People reported feeling energized, even revitalized. But then, something began to change. People started to fall apart, slowly, painfully, from the inside out. Bones weakened, teeth loosened, jaws began to disintegrate, and the man who trusted it most became its most infamous victim.
History is messy,
Weird, wild, anything but boring.
we're Rainy Day Rabbit Holes.
Exploring the unhinged side of history, politics, and culture.
Let's fall down the rabbit hole.
Welcome back to Rainy Day Rabbit Holes. I'm your host, Shea. Several weeks ago, we explored America's radium craze with Radiant Radium, whose work highlights an incredible collection of radioactive antiques and the strange history behind them. We talked about glowing clocks, radioactive beauty products, and a time when radiation was something people casually brought into their homes. Today, we are narrowing our focus because while many products claim to contain radium, most of them didn't. But one product did. It was called Radithor, and it was sold as something you were meant to drink. Today, the glow turns deadly. Radiant Radium, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on again. Our last episode was a listener favorite, and this is the story we only began to touch on. Very excited, and let's get into it. But before we dive into Radithor specifically, can you give a quick overview of the typical health and wellness products that were available during the radium craze?
Absolutely. So during the radium craze, particularly in the 1910s, is when radium water was kind of the number one thing that was coming out. Uranium-lined jars, things that were meant for radon emanation into your water. Then in the 20s, it started to kind of transition into kind of the beauty and lifestyle. So that would become, the face creams, the toothpaste, the makeup, and just wild things that they were putting out. And then by the 30s, it was full-blown quackery, which we're going to kind of get into. It was full-blown quackery. They were doing some absolutely wild cures. And so, we'll get into the story of Radithor, but it's really interesting to see the progression of, maybe you could drink it. Oh, maybe you could put it on your skin. Oh, maybe I should put it up my butt. It gets pretty crazy. I'm
glad you said it because I was waiting till the moment I could say, put it up your butt.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe
and
you
so
could irradiate your nuts with it.
Yes, it was quite a wild west of radioactive products. So, but you'll kind of see as we talk about why Radithor became kind of the most infamous product.
So what made Radithor different from all of these other radium health products?
So at this time, so we're talking the mid-1920s, early to mid-1920s is when this product first kind of came to market. And the big difference between this and many other products is you were straight up ingesting high amounts of radium. You would look at, the Revigators and the other quote, radium water apparatuses, and most of the time it was just uranium in them. And so you were just ingesting the byproduct of that, which was radon gas. Now, ingesting genuine radium was not as common back then because of the cost. Radium was ridiculously expensive. And what Radithor did was they actually put in enough radium into it that the corks today still scream on a Geiger counter. They are intensely, intensely hot.
Yeah, I've seen that on your TikTok and Instagram and YouTube channels. You commonly show holding up a Geiger counter, and you actually do handle those corks with gloves.
Yes.
Because just taking that extra step because of how highly radioactive they are. And those things just scream. They like go off the charts.
Yes. And what's even crazier to think about is, so radium's half-life is 1,600 years, right? So the radium in it originally is going to be just as hot now as it was 100 years ago. Give or take a tiny bit. What's absolutely wild is not a lot of people realize that Radithor actually contained two versions of radium, which was radium-226 and radium-228. Now, radium-228 is not as common during the radium craze, and it is actually much, much, much more intense. We're talking, I believe it's roughly 270 times more intense than radium. And
wow.
And you would technically call it today, not a lot of people call it radium-228 anymore. Today it's known really as mesothorium. There's two ways to name it, but it also contained that. And I don't know if you've ever heard, but in radioactivity, the shorter the half-life often means more intense. The half-life of radium-228 was only about 6 years. And so it's hundreds of times more radioactive at the time. So you could only imagine the damage it did to folks who drank it when it was first coming out.
Yeah. So the candle that burns twice as bright burns half as long. It applies to radioactive material as well. Yeah. So people are ingesting this and just getting tiny holes shot through all of their body.
Yes. It's very interesting looking back on it to kind of wonder why they went into it. But realistically, they just kind of assumed that the higher the radioactivity, the stronger it is, the more radium you ingested, that it was just better for you. And so looking back on it now, aside from the radium, the 226, the 228 as well, we're like, what the hell were you doing? Like, that is insanity.
I mean, okay, so we have Radithor. Were there any other products out there that you've come across that contained like this intensive a dose of radiation, or is Radithor kind of standalone?
So Radithor basically is kind of the main outlier of ingesting the actual isotope. So now, including this high amount of radioactivity, funny enough, the creator of Radithor loved to use radium-228 in many different products that he had. So much so that it just kind of became his, what do you call that? Kind of like his calling card. That's his
That's his jam.
That's what he loved. Apparently, he loved intensely hot radioactivity. And so, just to put it into perspective, when I test those corks of Radithor, I'm not able to test any of radium-228. It's long gone by this point.
Okay.
So the residual activity is just from that 226, pretty much. Wow. But yeah, we'll hop into some of the products that he liked to dope up even more.
Wow. So he's like, I'll kill you fast and I'll kill you slowly.
Yes. You'll get a double dose. Yeah.
Well, let's get into the creator, William J.A. Bailey. So we need to introduce this central figure in radium crack pottery.
Yes.
And who was this guy?
So William Bailey, he was I like to call him a con artist more than anything. So he has a very storied history. He was born in the 1800s, and by the time he was in his 20s, he had already been kind of a screw up. He had actually been accepted to Harvard and ended up dropping out of Harvard. My understanding is he had dropped out because of financial reasons. Now, it's kind of hard to say looking back on it if it was financial or if he was just kind of batshit crazy.
Okay. But obviously smart. Like, you don't get into Harvard without being smart, or I guess today buying your way in. But yes,
yes, a very smart man, a man who who knew how to readily utilize what was available to him.
Okay.
And so he, like I said, he had dropped out of Harvard. He had multiple different jobs. My understanding is he was even mining gold. He was kind of a jack of all trades, trying to make, a dollar any way that he could. He ended up actually getting in trouble for, I believe it was stock fraud at the time, and had done some jail time. And so once you get out of jail time, what's the first thing that you do? You start pretending to be a doctor. That's the logical solution,
that
right?
was pretty popular back then.
Very, especially during the radium craze, mind you.
Yeah.
So he decided to essentially pretend that he had a medical license and practice medicine by essentially coming up with wacky, weird products. And he had a very, very strange focus on sex glands. That was kind of his number one, I'm going to fix you impotent men. I'm going to fix you women who can't have, who can't get aroused. I'm going to, I have your cure-alls. And he, man, I'm going to go through the list of products here in a second, but he was hyper focused on people having sex.
Maybe he couldn't get laid, and that was part of the problem.
maybe, but to kind of put it into perspective, so some of his very first products was he was creating different types of tablets that he was claiming were essentially aphrodisiacs, and would stimulate your glands, and all of a sudden you would feel young again. And he got in trouble for one of his sets of pills prior to the radium craze, and then like any good American in the 1920s, he just kept doing it.
So whenabouts would that have been? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we're looking at the late 1910s, early 1920s is when he first starts getting into his trouble.
Okay. So when you said he was obsessed with sex and he's a quack and a fake doctor, I have been researching John R. Brinkley. Are you familiar with John R. Brinkley?
I'm not sure. Remind me.
So he's the guy who got famous for implanting goat testicles into people.
I think I've heard about this.
And he was practicing, he started his whole, he got a certificate from a diploma mill in 1912. So same time. And he also was obsessed with making sex better for people. So I'm wondering if this was just a product of its time, and maybe that was a phase in the late 1910s of being obsessed with your performance. Anyways, so that was a sidetrack. Sorry.
You're good. No, it very well could be, especially at the time, you had a couple of things you were doing. You were either, struggling to survive, working and slaving away, dying young. So I guess sex probably would have been a pretty big focus at the time, especially then.
Well, and creating a bigger family, because, a bigger family meant, yes, more mouths to feed, but also more labor available for you.
More labor, and realistically, you're probably going to lose 2 out of 5 kids,
right.
3 out of 5 kids, at the time. And so very, very interesting, the route that he took. So to, I guess, kind of start off with some of his products. So he first, one of his most famous at the time was a patent medicine called Radium. And it was a tablet that basically was marketed towards fixing your endocrine system. That was his big thing, was the endocrine system. Okay. And, I can kind of see why that would be a big thing, because the endocrine system does release your hormones to your body. Right. Maybe it's something that does need to be stimulated. But he was putting radium, of course, in these tablets. And he would advertise that these tablets would quite literally make you a Superman.
Okay. like in the bedroom.
Yes. Okay. And it would also show a bodybuilding strong man on the cover of his advertisements. And so, yes, it was about the sex products, but he was also like, hey, it's going to literally fix everything. There's parts of his booklet where it's if your prostate hurts, we're going to fix your prostate too at the same time.
Okay.
And so
it's going to make you a more manly man. And
yes, quite literally the advertisements were of these big, strong men and rays of energy coming off of them. And then Radium became kind of his baby. He started producing different things like Radium-based salves to put on your body. and then it became hair cream, and just all these different variations of Arium that he could liquidate and put on you.
And was this a product that contained radioactive materials, or was this just?
Yes, he was actually adding radium into this in very minute amounts, mind you. Even some of the samples today, they're pretty low radioactivity.
Okay.
And it wasn't just him. There was multiple people. I have a set of there's a pill called Dr. McMichael's All Gland, and it was for fixing all your glands.
Okay.
And so everyone was doing it, but he was kind of the most prominent at the time. And then that kind of led into the next set of products that he got into. He decided that he really enjoyed the endocrine system. And so he kind of, with a couple of other doctors,
and it liked making money off the endocrine system.
Making money off the endocrine system. They started studying something called radioendocrinology. And this was the early 1920s. There was, I believe it was a German doctor by the name of Dr. Eugene Steinitz. And he had developed a method essentially of irradiating your testicles.
All right. Great idea. Let's do it.
Yes. And that was for the impotent male. That was for the male who couldn't get it up. That was for the male who just didn't feel manly. It was pretty much anything. And so they kind of got interested in this method and decided to create their own device. And I actually have, this is the original booklet here describing the radioendocrinator is what they called it.
He's holding up a booklet that says scientific rejuvenation without operation. And what does it say underneath that? And gamma ray
treatment of chronic ailments.
All right. And it's a fun little booklet. I actually like the font on that. It's a good graphic design.
And check that out there. It says, "Let there be light."
Oh, all right.
Let there be light. The new science of radioendocrinology in its relation to rejuvenation and the relief of common ailments. So not just sex organs, mind you. It was everything.
A cure-all again. Yeah.
Another cure-all. And so what's super interesting is basically they decided that the person who should have their, testicles irradiated should be a rich man. If anybody,
Well,
of course. You can't just irradiate the peasants' balls, right?
We need those rich people to procreate and spread across the earth. What we need is more billionaires. Well, I guess back then millionaires, because billionaires was inconceivable.
And what he decided to start doing with his buddies was they took essentially paper and they soaked it in highly radioactive radium, including radium-228 again. That's, that was his favorite. And they soaked it and they placed it inside of a kind of a metal credit card shaped container with a screen on it. Okay. And it was essentially meant to be put into a jockstrap and the man would wear it overnight. He'd go to sleep and wake up in the morning and hopefully he was rejuvenated, He's
irradiated his nuts overnight. So
yes.
I would imagine this to be uncomfortable, like with a metal box pressing up against your junk all night long.
Yes. So funny enough, the activity of them was measured by a couple of groups. There was a gentleman who's a nuclear physicist in New Mexico. He actually had one and was able to measure it, and so was the famous ORAU Museum in Tennessee. And it puts off roughly, I believe it was it 20? Let me do the math here real quick. Essentially a ton of X-rays per hour. So it was 20 X-rays per hour worth of radiation that was being directed at your scrotum, if not a little bit more. There's varying measurements depending on how much he put into the radioendocrinator at the time. And the case itself that held these cards, because he wanted the rich men to irradiate their balls, it was actually 14 karat gold.
Okay, and so fancy irradiated nuts.
Fancy irradiated nuts. I'll send you a couple of reference photos from like the website that show the case and the actual box that came out in this case. It was this gorgeous like blue velvet, and it's just the prettiest thing. Of course, you'd want to irradiate your balls after seeing that. Right. But it cost, here's the whopper, in the mid 1920s, it cost $1,000.
Holy moly. Hold on. I got to get my inflation calculator up here. So this was when?
This was, let's say, about 1925. Let's use that as a
1925, and
reference
it
here.
was $1,000.
$1,000.
Whoops. $0 is worth $0 today. It's about $19,000. Okay.
Yes. And it, as you can imagine, it wasn't really a hit at that price. So he ended up kind of clearancing it out, over time. And it finally reached its final price point towards the end of the 1920s at $150.
That's about $3,000.
Yes.
So
much
quite
more
a
reasonable.
discount. Yeah. Now, would the case get hot?
So interestingly enough, the case itself wouldn't necessarily be like hot to the touch. However, this gentleman who did some testing of it, he actually ran some tests based off of like distance to the skin, how long you would wear it. And he determined that within like an hour to 2 hours, the scrotum would likely start to become itchy, red, and inflamed because of how intense this radiation is.
So like radiation burns happening
Yes.
while you're wearing this, and people that might be another reason why it wasn't super popular.
Yes, definitely. Well, and then what's even crazier too is he was projecting that if you wore it for the recommended amount of time, say for even a couple days, you could achieve temporary sterility because of how intense it was.
Wow. And then eventually permanent, I'm sure.
Yes. I don't think anybody really hung around it enough to really test that out.
Yeah, you'd have to be really, really devoted to testing this out to stand through that. So does gold provide any, but you said there was a screen, so there wasn't like solid metal between this irradiated paper and the skin.
So there was kind of a metal like mesh screen with like a plastic screen over it, kind of plasticky. And so there was definitely like you could contact the metal. However, the point of it was that it was supposed to be tucked inside of a jockstrap. So technically,
so there's some fabric.
Yeah, technically your testicles would lay on the fabric, which fabric's obviously not going to do anything for radiation. However, at least you're not laying right on top of the source.
Okay. Now, I'm assuming then, like, does the gold absorb the radiation as well? Like, if you took everything else out, would the gold would still be radioactive today?
So it would be contaminated. So basically, when radium decays into that radon gas byproduct. And what'll end up happening is that radon gas kind of clings to everything around it. And so, for example, there's folks that I know who own one. And when it sat in the case for, X amount of years or whatever, they took it out of the case and the case was intensely radioactive because of the radon. However, that will dissipate over time and essentially turn into lead, which you don't want to lick the lead either, but it's a lot safer, I think.
It's delicious.
Yeah. Grandparents love the paint chips. But yeah, so it would contaminate like crazy, and they still can contaminate like crazy. In fact, ORAU in Tennessee, they actually had to remove the source out of theirs to display it because it was so intense.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. And so this was called the radiant, please say the word for me. It's terrible, hard to say.
Radiendicrinator. Yes, you would think it would be like you would think it would be like radioendicrinator, but they wanted to make it difficult. So radiendicrinator.
Radiendicrinator. All right, I got it. No, I did not. All right, well, let's move on from that word I can't say. Okay, so this is one of his earlier products. So before Radithor.
Mm-hmm.
So was he convincing any kind of medical professionals to suggest this product to their patients, or was this still just kind of like he's selling it on his own?
So he was kind of full-blown quack at this point, even, in the mid-1920s. And so doctors weren't really being convinced of these types of products. Now, the pills, maybe technically, doctors would be more, obligated to show interest in it because it's less of like you're going to wear a jockstrap. And essentially, these were all, in a way, patent medicines. So they didn't necessarily require any type of prescription at the time.
Right.
And so, doctors could potentially recommend it if they believed in the kind of radium craze at the time, but not nearly as much as Radithor. And there's a reason for that.
Okay, so we have this jockstrap, we have pills, we have ointments, and then when do we graduate to Radithor?
Yes. So funny enough, it was kind of around the same time as the radioendochrinator that he decided, you know what? I'm going to kind of break off of this company that he was doing the jockstrap with, which was, I believe it was the American Radium Products Company, something similar to that. And he decided that he was going to kind of name a company after himself. So here comes the Bailey Radium Products Company.
Okay.
And so this is around the mid 1920s. Now, there's kind of evidence that it was early 1920s where when some of the tests were taking place, but we're going to give kind of a good start year of probably around 1924, 1925.
Okay.
So roughly the same time as the radioendocrinator, started in kind of in small bits. And so it's interesting. He ended up starting operations up in East Orange, New Jersey. And that's where the Bailey Radium Laboratory was. And there's kind of a funny story about it. He was so proud of his facility and so proud of the method for making Radithor that he put photos all over the booklets for Radithor of, his people, cleaning the corks and using triple distilled water. And here's the bottles being, sanitized, and come to find out they were all like fake photos that were from some other publication or whatever, but he couldn't even be honest about his facility.
Oh God, setting up quite the precedent already.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would imagine like a patent medicine is going to be a lot easier to sell than a $20,000 jockstrap. And then so how did he start? So he makes this product. I'm still curious about how he's getting his hands on all this radium, but I'm assuming like at that time it was still fairly easy to buy it.
Yes. So he was actually purchasing the radium from a local company, basically the type of company that would sell radium also to like the clock, manufacturers and the dial painters. And so he would purchase it wholesale. Now, you're going to kind of think of this price as maybe not being so horrible, but back then it was pretty expensive, especially when you consider the dosage that they would recommend. And so he was selling them for $1 a bottle. Okay. And here's the kicker. We were talking about if physicians would be willing to prescribe. He would give a kickback to every physician who prescribed it. And that kickback was roughly, I want to say it was about 16 cents or so per bottle. So it was a healthy percentage per bottle to the physicians. Okay. And he would make them purchase it in no lower quantities than 30 at a time.
Okay.
So he would get a healthy amount of money. Now, mind you, the amount of radium he used, even though it's so incredibly radioactive, it's actually a minuscule amount. The measurement today that we know is it was about 1 microcurie. And so I think it translates over into like literally 0.1 micrograms of radium.
Oh,
like
wow.
It's very, very minute amounts. And so we look at it and go like, God, how did he afford this? And how did he put it, so much in there? And realistically, it was like the tiniest amount blended in with water, essentially.
So do you happen to know like how much was like, I guess a gram of radium or at the time?
So 1 gram of radium, let me pull it up here. I actually have it listed. So 1 gram of radium at the time cost roughly $100,000 to $120,000. And so if you want to pull up your inflation calculator, that was as of 1924.
All right. So $120,000 would be $2.35 million today.
Yes, it was absolutely incredibly expensive. And so when you look at it, like, for example, let's see. So for example, we are looking at, it's like 100 million micrograms goes into 1 gram. And so...
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
yeah,
to put it in...
Okay, so $1 million at that time was about 1.96. So out of that, you could get 1 million micrograms.
It looks like it. So it's about 1 million micrograms, it looks like, of radium. And then he would get even smaller amounts than that. That just shows you how intensely radioactive radium is. For it to be.
So if he was going with 1 microgram, that would be about $1.96 in today's money per bottle. That is a $20 bottle today. So if he's getting any smaller, maybe he's down under $1 in today's money. So he's making and then the kickback. So he's still making $15 a bottle in today's money.
Exactly.
And then on scale, yeah.
Exactly. And, they did very, very well early on. And a lot of it has to do with the marketing. So, for example, here's an original pamphlet for Radithor. This is from, funny enough, 1931, and I'll tell you why that's funny later when we get into that. But there it is, Perpetual Sunshine.
Wow.
Perpetual Sunshine is how they advertised it. And it was just a huge marketing ploy. And they were essentially able to rope people in who, didn't necessarily think that ingesting radium was good for you. But hey, you know what? I want perpetual sunshine. I want my energy restored. And so he really captured the interest of a lot of different people at the time.
Yeah, I'm still blown away. I mean, I guess it was the time, but that he was able to convince doctors that this was okay. I mean, I guess we didn't understand the dangers of radium at that time. So getting the doctors to recommend this, that really seems like that was the step to get the public to trust him, right? And to trust this product.
Yes. And, looking back at it now, realistically, a lot of the reason those doctors were prescribing it was because of the kickbacks. Yeah. For example, the American Medical Association was absolutely around at the time. And I got to look at original documents when I visited the American Medical Association in Chicago. I got to visit their archives where they basically were saying at the time, like, do not do this. Do not drink this. Do not, there's no medical merit more than anything, not necessarily like it's going to hurt you or harm you, but more so like, what is he talking about? Why would you drink it? And so the doctors getting this kickback, some of them prescribed hundreds, thousands of bottles to their patients, and they got such a healthy kickback that, it made financial sense for them at the time. Many of which, eventually kind of came back and were like, yeah, I didn't really believe in it, but couldn't hurt. One of the advertisements famous from Radithor, I'll have to get you some pictures, is they quite literally say that Radithor is harmless in every way, that there's no harm that can come from it, and there's no too much or too little amount that you can take.
Wow.
And so they were so proud of the fact that they were using genuine radium. I wish I kind of had my blacklight with me. I have a video of it, but this spot right here is actually radium. They actually painted radium on this pamphlet, and it would glow at the time. So that way they could advertise to you and show you, look how cool this is. Look how innovative we are. They were so proud of the fact.
Wow. That's chilling. So it seems that when people initially would ingest this, that they might actually feel a little bit better for a time. And I'm sure part of that is, when you buy something that's expensive, you're going to give it a higher rating than something that was cheap because of the, sunk cost into it. So why would people maybe beyond the psychological, why would people physically maybe feel better for a time?
Yeah. So what's really, really interesting about radium is, and we kind of touched on it briefly before, was radium tricks the body into thinking that it's calcium. And so the human body gets confused and decides that what's the best thing to do with this calcium, it assumes, is to store it into the bones. And so, yes, Radithor was prescribed for a lot of different things, but one of the main things that people always swore they felt better on was like orthopedic related injuries. So broken arms, fractures, sprains, all these different things. And realistically, they probably started feeling really good because the body was, in a sense, repairing itself and, thinking it's calcium and storing it in the bones and making the bones stronger just for that radium to start punching holes in the very bones that it's stored in. And so folks probably were like, oh my God, this is a miracle. And that kind of leads into Radithor Radithor's downfall in the end, because as you know, even though it wasn't necessarily a good thing, a lot of a good thing can be a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of leads us into the people, the key players, and the downfall of Radithor later down the line.
I've heard also the initial stages of radium poisoning can actually give you kind of a glow.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if people are drinking, like if they're drinking radium water, for instance, they're just drinking more water, which tends to make you feel better and look better in the end because you're hydrated. So I'm sure all of these, and maybe Radithor itself, it's very small amounts of water, but I'm wondering if people who are consuming Radithor are also maybe have a Revigator at home and are drinking radium water.
Most likely. A lot of people really thought that they couldn't get enough. They genuinely thought that it was something that you could have as much as possible and it could never harm you. And, the other interesting thing about it, so yeah, you're right with radiation poisoning, for example, radiation sickness. A lot of times people who get radiation sickness, for example, people who were involved in, nuclear level accidents and stuff like that, many times it almost appeared as if they got better after they initially got sick, because the body kind of tricks itself into like, oh yeah, we feel fantastic. And some of the people look like they were recovering from some of these nuclear accidents. And then that's usually the sign that things are about to get really, really bad because of how confused the body gets. And so, there's multiple different factors that could play into why they may have felt good, but there's also some kind of conspiracy behind it. A lot of folks...
Ooh, ears are perking up.
Yeah, it's, not necessarily conspiracies that I like to believe in, but it's one of those things where a lot of people felt that maybe, radium was a good thing at the time, really was a good thing, and it wasn't necessarily as harmful as it was later proven to be. And so the other part of it is the human body is weird, right? It's very almost magical in the way that it can repair itself at times. And so, one person who may drink a ton of Radithor and their bones fall apart, and the next person takes it and they have no symptoms for years. It's very interesting. And after we get kind of deeper into it, I'm going to bring up a special case that was very, very interesting to read up on.
I mean, while we're talking about the people who consumed a ton of Radithor, but before we get into that, let's take a quick break. So, quick behind the scenes confession. Making this podcast is a blast. Marketing the podcast? Not so much. Between researching weird historical mysteries, writing episodes, recording, editing, and trying to remember what day it is, building newsletters always seemed to fall to the bottom of the list. The old tools we tried were clunky, time-consuming, and honestly, kind of a pain. Then we found Breezy Send. Breezy Send is built for small businesses, creators, and people who wear about 17 different hats every day. It's photo first, which means you can upload photos of your work, write a quick message, and have a professional-looking marketing email ready to go in minutes. No design degree, no marketing expertise, and no spending your entire afternoon trying to center a logo. It even includes AI tools that help polish your writing and make your emails sound clear, professional, and engaging. In fact, I used Breezy Send to create a newsletter promoting our upcoming live show, and what used to take forever took just a few minutes. It's so easy, even a hot dummy like me can do it. And if you're a Rainy Day Rabbit Holes listener, we've got a special deal for you. Get Breezy Send for just $10 per month or $99 for a full 13 months. Head to breezysend.com/RDRH to claim your discount today. That's BRZYSEND.com/RDRH. Check it out and see how easy email marketing can be. And a big thank you to Breezy Send for sponsoring the show.
Trading at Schwab is now powered by Ameritrade, unlocking the power of Thinkorswim, the award-winning trading platforms loaded with features that let you dive deeper into the market. Visualize your trades in a new light on Thinkorswim desktop with robust charting and analysis tools, all while you uncover new opportunities with up-to-the-minute market news and insights. Thinkorswim is available on desktop, web, and mobile to meet you where you are. It's built by the trading obsessed to help you trade brilliantly. Learn more at schwab.com/trading.
All right, welcome back. I am here again with Radiant Radium talking about the patent medicine Radithor. And we were about to get into one of the most infamous consumers of this patent medicine. Let's talk about Eben Byers. We touched on briefly on the last episode, but let's get a little bit deeper into his story and how this may have marked the tide turning for these type of products.
Definitely. So Ebenezer Byers was a very popular at the time. He was a socialite, and he was a playboy, and he was a golf champion. He was a very wealthy and influential man at the time, and he was kind of the number one victim that everyone thinks of and talks about when it comes to Radithor and the collapse of the radium industry. And so it's a very sad story. In the end, you kind of look at it and you go, well, you did it to yourself. But in the 1920s and 30s, they were very much led to believe that what they were doing was healthy for them. And some of the science at the time, we had the Radium girls, but a lot of people look back at the Radium girls and they, such a tragic story, especially, related to the paint. But there was also a lot of damage that was being done to their body strictly from the phosphors of the paint, right? Not even just the radium. We're talking the zinc sulfide that they were also ingesting. Back then there was a very famous condition called phossy jaw from phosphors that would essentially rot jaws away. And it was just from the paint. And so at the time, there was a lot of non-believers, when it came to the Radium girls. They thought that, they ingested a lot of radium. However, is it really the radium?
Right.
There was already smear campaigns at the time calling them, floozies and saying they all had chlamydia and gonorrhea and that's what killed them. And then on top of that, there's the scientific proof that ingesting a bunch of zinc sulfide paint phosphor probably isn't good either, right? Not to downplay or minimize the Radium girls, but that's kind of what was the public perception at the time. Because the Radium girls, they were kind of, in a sense, in the middle of their court battles during all this time. This was big public information, but the Radium craze continued on.
Right. And Curie hadn't passed away yet at this point, right? So
Correct.
She didn't die till 34. So we don't have the public's not fully aware at this point. So if doctors are recommending it and it's still so popular, you can't blame the victims too much.
Exactly. Well, and to put it into big perspective, I think I believe it was around 1927 or so, the Radium girls stuff was kind of ending, and people already had a huge public knowledge of the case and the workplace issues that the Radium girls faced. And to put it into perspective, Eben Byers didn't start taking Radithor until around the exact same time, 1927.
Okay. So he might have had some awareness of this, but again, with the smear campaigns that were going on at the time, downplaying the effects of radiation on those women, he may not have taken it seriously.
Correct. And like a lot of the nation, because, the radium craze realistically continued well into 1932, several years after the Radium girls story had ended. And, consumer use of radium didn't stop until the 1970s in the US. We still used it in clocks and, different other applications that you look back on and you go, wow, it really was that hazardous, but you're still going to continue using it. And, a lot of it was workplace issues. But anyways, not to get too much on a tangent, let's talk about, Eben's experience with Radithor.
Yeah. So where did he first come across Radithor?
So to kind of start the story off, he was traveling. In 1927, he was on a train ride and he had actually fallen from his bunk. He took a really nasty fall, ended up landing on his shoulder, and it was kind of an unbearable pain to the point where he decided to go see his physician. And basically, he went to the physician, and the physician's first kind of, thing was, well, have you tried Radithor? It's this wonderful new medicine. I think it's going to do wonders for you. And Eben decided to start taking it, and it was prescribed initially to pretty much all patients, anywhere from 1 to 3 bottles a day.
Wow.
And so one thing to kind of look at that's super interesting is many, many, many different news sites, historical groups, historical sites, they often misreport how much Radithor was prescribed for. So, for example, they say, oh, Eben was taking this amount per day. That's ridiculous. It was only 1 per day that was supposed to be prescribed. That's why he was poisoned from it. No. Radithor was recommended between 1 to 3 bottles a day, depending on your condition.
Well, and if a doctor is getting a nice kickback from it and his client is wealthy and his patient is wealthy,
you're going to be taking 3 a day.
Yeah, that's... In today's money from 1927, that's about $1,700 a month.
Yes. And so to really kind of reel it back in and think about it, a lot of people put the blame on Eben, which I think is, warranted in some ways, but is for the most part entirely unfair because, much of the media today talks about the fact that Eben basically overdosed himself. Well, that was the prescriber and the physician's recommendation at the time. So a lot of people put it into gross negligence, like, oh, Eben should have known to stick to 1 bottle a day. Maybe he wouldn't have been so ravaged. And the reality is, no, he was following his physician's orders. Now, he did get a little crazy with it. And the reason I say that is he started taking it and he started to feel really good. And I think, kind of like we talked about, I think a lot of it was placebo, but also the fact that the calcium, issue was potentially, rearing its head, and the body was repairing itself with radium. And so he was taking 3 bottles a day for several years. He was so in love with Radithor that he would buy boxes of it for his friends, for his girlfriends, his, ladies of the night that he would spend, some time with.
Wow.
He even started buying it for his racehorses because he
thought...
Oh,
no, not the horses.
He thought that it was not just great for his shoulder, but he genuinely thought it was like a miracle. He felt young as ever, rejuvenated as ever. And so he was, buying tons and tons of boxes of this through his doctor, of course. And so, the doctor's getting a nice healthy check. The Radithor company's getting a nice healthy check from Eben. And it went on for several years before he started to feel any ill effects.
That's amazing. So it took him that long to start to get symptoms of radiation sickness.
Yes. So basically, and so this is where it gets a little funky. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it. So true radiation sickness is typically not going to come from something like this. This was essentially radium poisoning.
Okay.
And so radiation sickness will often come from like high levels of radiation happening at one time in one short dose. That's typically acute radiation sickness, right?
Okay, like you were exposed to the Fukushima.
Exactly.
You were there, you absorbed it over a day or two, and then you're moving away from the source of it, but you get the ill effects. So this is prolonged ingestion. And also, like you've talked on the other on our last one, ingesting it is quite a bit different than having your skin in between the radiation source and your organs, and this has taken that out of it.
Yes. And so essentially the radium was allowed to go into his body, be stored in his bones, and wreak havoc amongst his body. Now, the really interesting thing is he didn't really stop taking Radithor until 1930, so about 3 years in. So it did take quite a while. And it wasn't even necessarily that he was like, God, I feel terrible. It was just kind of like it started wearing off. It was not as, he didn't feel as great. He didn't feel as potent. He wasn't feeling as strong.
So he didn't stop taking it because of symptoms? Like, I was thinking maybe he continued taking it when he had symptoms because he was attributing it to something else. And
so it really started with him struggling to get any effect out of it. And then from that point on is when he started kind of feeling like, general kind of malaise, like aches and pains, and just not feeling well overall. And so eventually he kind of started developing like severe pain in his mouth, and he would go see his doctor, and his doctors kind of determined at that point that he was in really, really bad shape. He had holes essentially being punched through his jaw by this radium stored in his bones. So much so that they eventually needed to operate and actually remove the majority of his lower jaw. They removed the majority of his lower jaw, and they, portions of his upper jaw. So he was quite literally just a couple of teeth left in the upper jaw, by the 1930s. He had apparently started kind of reporting it out to people. And this is kind of the point where the U.S. government is starting to get involved, right? It's very interesting how they came to be involved. And it's primarily because they were hearing reports of, people getting kind of sick and ill from it. But realistically, there's not a lot of paper trail of that. The U.S. government just kind of stepped in at some point and decided to start investigating. Now, mind you, the FDA was technically around, but the FDA had no real oversight over patent medicines.
Okay, it was toothless
at this time. Yeah. So basically,
kind of like the way it is right now with the supplement industry.
Yes. And so, funny enough, the ones who actually did the full investigation wasn't even the FDA, it was the FTC. They were more interested in William Bailey's false claims. And funny enough, the FTC had done some investigations at the time. It's kind of weird to think about, but they were actually investigating claims of different products being not radioactive as advertised. So they would they would kind of go through and be like, yeah, you said that you would get 10,000 Mach units of emanation in your water. We only measured 5,000. What's up with that? You guys are getting fined, And so they actually started looking into William Bailey's companies because of his false claims and his history. And so Eben Byers just so happened to kind of be the catalyst at the time that they could use to say, hey, look, it also has ill effects.
And by the way, guys, while we were talking here, I made the mistake of looking up jaw necrosis. Don't do it. I'm saying don't do it. Nightmares. Also, good reason if you know anybody that chews chewing tobacco to send them those pictures.
Yes. And
it is horrifying. And I didn't even get to where Eben might have been. I saw 2 pictures and pieced out. Yeah. Nope.
There's a very famous photo that circulates, and people claim it's Eben Byers. It's an old war veteran that he had his lower jaw blown off in combat in World War I believe it was. And he's in a medical journal, and people, for whatever reason, because there's no pictures of Eben Byers' late stage in life, they started using that photo and saying, this was him. He lost his jaw, blah, 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 blah. So,
well, I can imagine at that point, he doesn't want anybody to see him. He's not going to go out in public. He's probably seeing doctors, and they're probably coming to his house.
Yes, he has house calls at his mansion. He's basically hasn't been in the public eye in a while. He is so frail and sickly that he can't even testify against the Bailey Radium Corporation. And so what ended up happening actually was the FTC sent out a lawyer to Eben's house, and he was the one who interviewed him about his Radithor usage, as well as being the first person to essentially see him without a lower jaw. And Eben actually, estimated that by the time he was done taking Radithor, around 1930, he had consumed 1,400 bottles of it.
Wow!
Which
Hold on, I got to do the math.
Lot.
1,400. So $1 a piece. So that's about $27,000.
Yeah. Which,
okay, that's...
he was a very wealthy man, but to spend almost $30,000 on any type of treatment is crazy. And that's just him. That's not him sending, bottles to his girlfriends or feeding his horses. That's just his personal consumption.
Right. So maybe multiply that by a couple of times.
Yes.
So from the time that he started or maybe stopped taking Radithor, actually, let's do this. From the time he started taking Radithor to the time he finally passed away, how much time has passed?
So he passed in 1932. So we are looking at about 5 years total from the time he started taking it. So you can look at it, and you can look at it, as a glass half full, glass, half empty kind of situation of 5 years is a significant amount of time. However, two and a half years of that was plagued with symptoms and with issues, and being literally so frail that he could not communicate. He could not get up out of bed or anything like that for at least a year or two. And so but still, it is a significant amount of time for that radium to build up and to finally start causing issues. And what everyone kind of believes happened is essentially his body was just so ravaged by it, by cancers and by holes in his body, that his system just kind of gave out. And he ended up passing away March 31st of 1932. And then I actually have an original copy of the New York Times from April 1st, 1932, April Fool's Day, of course, where they announced his death by radium.
Wow. And they actually did say radium poisoning. So the tide started to turn. It started to turn
right on that very day. But here's what's super, super interesting. So he passed away on the 31st. It was actually first reported on the 31st in some local newspapers. And they actually reported that he passed away from pneumonia. Right. Mm. That was the thing that was put out in the news. And so everyone was kind of like, oh my gosh, he passed away from pneumonia. How sad, but also not uncommon for a 50-year-old man in 1932. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then the very next day, they announced that it was radium poisoning, which, conspiracy theorists love to look at this and go, how the hell did you test for radium poisoning in one day? In 1932, but realistically, they probably had access to samples prior to his death,
right?
That they were testing, especially with his testimony that he was giving regarding Radithor. But yeah, it was front page news of the New York Times that he had passed away, and it really set the precedent for the radium industry collapsing.
So, how did the public react when he died, and this was started to be made widely known that radium actually is, for lack of a better word, poisonous?
So there was a couple of different ways people responded. There was the typical, oh yeah, BS. He probably died from something else.
Mm-hmm. Chlamydia,
exactly. And then there was the folks who blamed him as well. There was the ones who kind of said, well, you shouldn't have drank so much Radithor. Right. You had too much of a good thing. And then there was also the folks who were mortified by it and started to kind of back away from radium in all aspects of their life. But here's what's really interesting. Now, of course, like the media loves to do, the media hopped onto it and they started exposing high prominent officials who were Radithor users. So they actually, I believe it was the mayor of New York at the time, they basically published essentially like a tabloid thing saying, we question the mayor on his usage of Radithor. Why is he okay to take it? Look at Evan Byers. He just passed away. Our leaders are taking radium and look what it just did to somebody. And the mayor at the time essentially responded with, hey, I'm still doing fine and I'm going to continue to take it, so there was a huge dichotomy of good reactions and bad reactions. In fact, there was, of course, lawyers who also saw dollar signs. And so the first thing they did was they would pay for articles in the paper, 100 people afflicted by radium, looking for answers. And they would never give names, right? They would never disclose people's names of who was affected, but they claimed that there was hundreds of people lining up to, argue against the Bailey Radium Corporation. And William Bailey himself was actually interviewed, and he straight up said that radium was not the issue. And he said, I've drank more radium than any man alive, and I'm doing just fine.
Do you think he was truthful? Do you think he was drinking it?
So, interestingly enough, yes. We found out later that he was indeed, in a way, getting high on his own supply. And he ended up dying, I want to say in the 60s, if I remember correctly. I believe he died around the mid-1960s. So he lived on for quite a while longer. And they actually had exhumed his body. He died of bladder cancer, mind you. But they had exhumed his body and determined that his body was fairly radioactive. Oh, I'm sorry. He died in 49. So he died I'm thinking of another creator. He
Okay.
died about, what would that be, about 17 years later. So he had a good, 17 more years on. And he died at aged 64.
Yeah, but
And
the
so,
cancer may not have gotten him if he hadn't have been taking the Radithor.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so they did determine that he... his body was radioactive, as was Eben. They did autopsies on Eben Byers, and then they also exhumed his body later and determined that his bones were still, intensely radioactive, that they were still, quote, hot at the time. Hot enough that they could, do essentially almost like radiograph X-ray style images with the intensity coming off of his bones. And there's some photos that are out there of like a couple pieces of his bones that are all kind of, they're using it for a radiograph, and I'll have to find that for you. They're in like old medical reports.
Wow.
But his body was absolutely ravaged. They said, punched holes through his body from head to toe, essentially.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah. And so
That's terrible.
very, very interesting. And, looking back at it, William Bailey dying at 64, that really wasn't an uncommon age, which did not help the radium industry's believers. They kind of looked at it as, well, he was okay for longer. Maybe you shouldn't drink 3 bottles a day. And that's kind of where that stigma came from, of blaming the victim. Mm-hmm. But realistically, the radium craze continued well after even William Bailey was dead. For example, the cones, the radium water emanation cones, there's evidence that they were manufactured well into the 60s.
Wow.
The
known better by then.
You would think, but the FDA essentially at the time told them, and the FTC, you can continue to make them, you just can't say that they're a cure anymore. So in a way, they had a hand in perpetuating it. Yeah. And going back to this pamphlet, why I said it was a funny date on it was because Radithor was actually ordered around 1930 to stop operations and to cease, by the FTC in 1930, and this pamphlet is actually stamped here 1931.
So they just kept going even after they were ordered to cease operations. Pretty
much. Yeah, and funny enough, this is September 11th of 1931. So it's very late into 31. And then, interestingly enough, there was no litigation against William Bailey or Bailey Radium Laboratories. Kind of like the other radium craze items, the government just kind of allowed them to shut down shop and disappear. And William Bailey ended up working in another industry. I believe it was regarding communications in World War II, if I remember correctly, after the fact. And so he kind of got off scot-free until he passed away.
So how long did Radithor linger before it was gone?
Realistically, it was dead by the time Eben Byers had passed away. What actually happened is very interesting compared to all the other radioactive quack cures at the time. This was the U.S. government's chance to actually go in and confiscate and destroy, because it was a medicine that was typically sold in pharmacies, as opposed to like a water jug that you could buy direct from the company or a dealer. Mm-hmm. So they actually went to different pharmacies and rounded up bottles and bottles of Radithor and destroyed it. Same with the other, like the Arium tablets, the other medicine that Bailey had created. They went to pharmacies, rounded it up, and destroyed them. And so that's part of the reason they're so incredibly rare to find today.
Okay, so my question is what did they do with these bottles? Like, how did they destroy them? And they're dealing with radioactive material. Like, where did it go?
Not a lot of information on that. There's sources that say that that pharmacies were told that they were going to be incinerated. There's rumors that they were going to repurpose the radium into something else. Because it was diluted down into water, but not really any good answers around that. I know that there's a couple of stories of people confiscating these things from pharmacies, and then years later down the line, some grandkid found it in his grandpa's closet because grandpa worked for the FTC or whoever it was, and they collected it and basically kept it, as something that they confiscated.
I'm just thinking that there's like a basement storage room somewhere that's got thousands of bottles of this.
Yes.
that somebody's going to stumble into one day. It's just in like cardboard boxes.
Right. Realistically, they probably did incinerate much of it. It's going to be hard to tell. I can tell you that Radithor is probably, in the collector world at least, is probably one of, if not the most scarce products out there from the radium health craze. And a lot of that being because they did round up and take it. The Revigator company was ordered to stop, but there was a secondhand market for them.
Sure.
Many other quack cures, there was secondhand markets that you could still buy products in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. Radithor was the one that it was really like, let's get this the hell out of here. We need to destroy these.
So when a collector comes across a bottle of Radithor today, I'm assuming like the water is completely evaporated at this point.
Correct.
So there's just the residue of the radium left in the bottle.
Correct. And so, for example, I have one of my original bottles here. And so basically, you really can't tell on camera, but there's little like kind of crystallization at the very, very bottom. It's kind of like a whitish gray color, but the majority of everything actually ended up soaking into the cork. And so the cork is fairly radioactive. The bottom of the bottle is fairly radioactive, but not nearly as much as the cork.
Wow.
So if you do happen to, in the incredibly rare chance, come across one out in the public, I would not pop the cork out of it because there's a massive contamination risk, especially with inhalation, unless you're in a controlled environment. But they are so scarce that, for a while there, you could pick up a bottle if they came up for $200, $300, $400. They weren't terribly expensive in terms of a rarity. And then one actually ended up selling not horribly long ago for $1,600 for one bottle. And now the hype is so crazy, and unfortunately I think I've played a little bit of a part of it.
Oh no.
That the hype is a little ridiculous right now, and I've received offers of $3,000 for a single bottle.
Oh wow.
Of just one. And for me, like, that's great, but I'm very much a preservationist and a historian when it comes to this stuff. And so I'm trying to not just pass Radithors out to everybody, unfortunately, at the moment. As cool as they are also very, very radioactive.
Yeah. And I know that keeping the public safe is one of your goals. I know you've gotten plenty of people who want to buy the Revigators or the Emanator cones to use for personal use. So better not to just let these things fall into everybody's hands. Every whack job on the internet.
I got an email the other day from somebody who goes, I'm really interested in a Revigator. And I'm like, okay, I don't have any right now for sale. Like, everything's in the private collection. And they go, okay, well, let me know when it's available. I really want to buy one. I'll give you $1,500. And I'm like, okay, like I'm okay right now. Thank you. And they go, but I really want to educate the public on this because this is so dangerous. And I'm thinking, like, what? I think you're lying. I think you're wanting to buy one, to use one, or mess around with it, because that's a weird high amount of money to throw out for a jar for you to educate the public. Something I'm already kind of doing.
Yeah, and also
with my
these
platform,
are widely available to the public. Like it's not a clear and present danger to the public.
Yeah,
that we're just going around and maybe accidentally using a Revigator.
Exactly.
Like it's got to be very rare that the public has these in their hands. It's either collectors or people that got this passed on from grandma, and they're probably not drinking water out of like grandma's antique jug.
Exactly. Well, and if you look at the inside of it, I don't think any sane person, regardless of radioactivity, if you don't even know, it's just they look so dirty and nasty inside because it's crushed up uranium in there. You see
crockery jugs in antique stores, and I'm like, I'm not drinking out of that thing. That looks gross.
Exactly. And so I can see through a lot of people when they want to do stuff like that. At the end of the day, a lot of times it'll be like, to each their own, do what you're going to do, Darwinism, but at the same time, it's like, I want to do my part as best I can to keep products out of the hands of folks who don't know much about them or just think it's kind of cool. Like, for example, there's collectors all the time who reach out like, I'd love a bottle of Radithor so much. I want to put it next to my uranium glass. And while I appreciate that, it's like, you're looking at something that's not only much more intensely radioactive, but also much more historically significant than, in my opinion, just putting on a shelf because it looks cool with my other radioactive stuff. You know, that's a tough thing.
Yeah,
and people give me crap for it.
Yeah, go to Michael's, get a cool looking bottle, print your own little label out and put it next to it, you know?
Exactly.
You don't actually need the radiation right next to your uranium glass.
Exactly.
You know, the thing I worry about with some of these crackpots, Darwinism, like, you know, let them, survival of the fittest, take yourself out. Problem is, a lot of those people have children that they also... you know, will do these things too. So that, you know, sure, if you're an adult and you choose to do stupid things to yourself, that's one thing. But when you start hurting the, you know, people around you, that's a big problem. So
exactly.
So we're seeing, you know, like you said, the radioactive or the radium craze continues well into the 60s and 70s. But really, Eben Byer's death and the downfall of Radithor is kind of the turning point for people widely accepting these products into their lives. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Yeah. The majority of the public at this point basically went with the headlines and kind of understood that radium probably isn't the best thing. This combined with the Radium Girls at the time, you know, was really a huge turning point. But interestingly enough, what really became an even bigger turning point, because, you know, there was people who continued to use them 10, 15, 20 years later, was actually the nuclear bombs. That you know, the U.S. had dropped on Japan. And that's when the public first really got to see the genuine effects of radiation on the human body. And it transitioned from the radium craze and health craze to the atomic age, right? We were more interested in the science aspect of it. And so there were still quite a few non-believers in the dangers of radium well into that point, but it really was the nuclear atomic age that kind of took over, and people really saw what radiation could do to the body. And, you know, that's when it really, I'd like to say that the radium craze really died in the early to mid 1940s.
And then from here, you know, it's interesting as you're talking about some of these advertisements and some of the ways people talked about these products and these cures, and people continued to deny the harmful effects of radiation. Do you see parallels today in modern health or wellness trends?
I do. I see, you know, supplements is a huge thing. You know, supplements is a huge industry that, you know, you take too much of a certain supplement and you can do severe damage to your body. And it's almost entirely unregulated, you know, and it's there's even, honestly, not even looking at like parallels to other products, there is still radiation quackery out there today. You know, there's thoriated, you know, using radioactive thorium. There is, pendants that you can wear on your body. There's pens that you use full of thorium sand that you can, you know, stir your tea with or your water to make, quote, you know, thoriated radioactive tea.
Wow.
There's people who still buy, you know, pieces of uranium to put into, you know, jewelry products, or, you know, there's people who still buy uranium stones to put into their drinking water. That's still widely available. You can actually go on eBay right now and find radium/uranium style stones. If you look up radium stones from Japan.
Of course it's Japan. Come on. Radium
Yes.
stones. Okay, I'm looking it up. Okay. Yeah, radium or raw mineral Japan. You know, you can buy a stone for $40 to $60.
Yep. And it's meant to put into your drinking water and have radon emanations in your drinking water. Now, something I haven't really talked about too much is there is positive effects of radon gas in studies on things like arthritis. So there are positive effects that have been notated in the past. So, for example, in Japan, they have a lot of radium hot springs, right? So naturally occurring radioactive material that impregnates the water with radon gas. And a lot of people say they really feel good. They feel rejuvenated. Now, there are studies that show that radon gas in very small amounts can help things like arthritis pain and aches and pains and joint issues and stuff like that. But too much of it, and you're starting to delve into the cancer, the risk of cancer increasing. And so Japan's a huge proponent of radium rocks, radium quackery type stuff. And sometimes you have to wonder because they do live so healthy and they do live to such a long age. But I think a lot of it has to do with their diet and their culture and, exercise.
They exercise on whole a lot more than Westerners. Yeah. When you go there, you're walking miles a day and
yes.
Eating a lot less.
Exactly.
Unless you're on vacation.
Yes.
How do I walk 12 miles a day and gain weight when I come back from Japan?
It's all that damn sodium in the ramen.
Oh, the ramen is stop. I can't think about ramen right now. I'm hungry.
And so, we have actually in Montana, we have radon health mines that are still operating in Montana where you can go and, they do it on a donation basis. You go and you pay a couple bucks and you can go sit in an old uranium mine and breathe in radon gas. And again, they're
okay.
Exactly. So
I'm not okay with this.
It's like there's potential that, maybe radon in small amounts can help with some pain and stuff like that. However, it's a carcinogen.
Right.
That's the problem. It's so just like people feel fantastic after smoking a cigarette.
Mm-hmm. I feel fantastic after a beer.
Exactly.
It's good for me.
Exactly. You shouldn't have, a ton of it at one time. And so there's a lot of weird health parallels that still continue today. And it's amazing to me that with as much ridiculous restrictions that the FDA puts on medicine, for example, that it's totally okay to go on Amazon right now and buy radioactive pendants to put in your water,
that's insane, but
absolutely wild.
It is wild. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing this story with us. This was awesome. I was so excited to get deeper into this whole story. Now, where can people find you and your amazing content and see the Radithor cork light up your Geiger counter?
Yes, I am on Instagram and TikTok as @RadiantRadium and on YouTube as @radiant.radium. I have a lot of really cool videos that I've done recently. Even more are coming up. Last time we talked, we mentioned that my kind of dream find, my number one piece was the face cream dispenser, right? The Revigorette. And I'm actually driving on Monday to meet someone to pick one up.
Amazing. So that's the little crock that you would put your own facial cream in and it would infuse it with radium. That's amazing. How exciting.
Yes. I'm so excited about it. And it's funny enough, you mentioned Japan, and we talked about ramen because I'm actually picking it up, and then we're heading straight to Japantown in the Bay Area right after.
Yes.
So we'll go get some of our own ramen. Yes. But
I thought you were going to pick it up and head to Japan. I'm really excited.
I wish. But that's where I am on social media at Radiant Radium for the most part, and just a lot of very cool products that I'm showing off. And I promise everyone, as much as people like to say otherwise, they are all legal. I want to throw this out that in the United States, we have a general license that is provided by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to purchase these products and to own them, display them, as long as you're not using them for their intended purpose or, selling them for that purpose or playing around with open sources and contaminating your neighborhood. And that license is NRC's General License 10 CFR 31.12 for any of you guys who want to continue to threaten to come, raid my house and take all my goods.
Jeez.
Please educate yourself first before you show up.
Educate yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yes.
And definitely make sure you go back if you haven't listened to our first episode together, and Radiant Radium gets into his collection and some of the different types of products that he has, and we kind of get a little bit more into the wide variety of different radium either containing or just radium advertising products. in that episode. So please go check out Radiant Radium on all of the socials. Great content. They're fantastic. Please do not drink water out of a revigator. And please, for the love of God, stop sticking stuff up your butt. And that includes radioactive stuff, unless your doctor tells you to do it.
Yes, unless your doctor's getting a healthy kickback from William Bailey. Because, yes.
Or if it has a flared base.
Yes. Oh my. I have those freaking cone emanators. 90% of my comments on the cones are, it has a flared base. It's safe.
Those things are giant. That would take somebody with a lot of willpower to get one of those where the sun doesn't shine. Well, I was going to say, I did recently do a little episode about the Frenchman who got a World War II artillery shell stuck inside of him. So, I mean, people will go for it.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Jeez. You owe me irradiated water.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. All right, straight from the tap. I got plenty of them right here for you.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll wrap this up. Please, everyone, make sure you go check out rainydayrabbitholes.com for all of our other episodes, links to join the Patreon, and of course, our upcoming live show in Tacoma, Washington on September 16th, where I will be bringing the story of Klondike Kate and the Pantages Theater. Tickets are available at rainydayrabbitholes.com. There's a link that'll take you right to the McMenamins site. And we will be doing a meet and greet from 6 to 6:30 before the show. So please come out and check it out. And I would say go to our social media page, but I never do anything with it. I will for this. But you can definitely go to Radiant Radium social media. And thanks again, and hope to have you on again soon to talk about more of your products, adventures, and your upcoming book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Rainy Day Rabbit Holes. We thought maybe you had forgotten. How could you forget? We are your hosts, Shea
and Jody.
And you can find all things on our website, rainydayrabbitholes.com, like sources, notes, pictures, links, whatnot. That beautiful website is designed and managed by the amazing and talented Letha Davis at easybreezy.com. That's Easy Breezy, EASYBRZY.com. All episodes are edited and produced by me, Shea, and you can reach out with any questions or comments at Shea@rainydayrabbitholes.com. That's SHEA. Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast with your friends and family, and stay curious. See you down the rabbit hole.
Hi, I'm Moji Alawodeyal from the Feminist Buzzkills Live Pod, the only podcast that helps you navigate the news in this post-pro anti-abortion hellscape. Each week, with co-host Liz Winstead, we dissect all the news from that sketchy intersection of abortion and misogyny with providers and activists working on the ground. The cherry on top is we have amazing comedy guests who help us laugh through the rage. Feminist Buzzkills Live drops Fridays wherever you pod. Listen and subscribe, because when BS is poppin', we pop off.
History is messy. It's weird, wild, and anything but boring. Rainy Day Rabbit Holes is a history podcast about unhinged stories that make you stop and ask, wait, is this real life?
From crazy disasters and tasty scandals to enlightening and surprising heartwarming tales, we explore the moments where people behave badly and sometimes beautifully.
We've got naughty politicians, cultural chaos, and a deep love for the Pacific Northwest, including Bigfoot.
It's thoughtful, irreverent, occasionally serious, and always entertaining.
Let's fall down the rabbit hole.
MSW Media.